The council chamber reeked of ammonia and confidence. 12 species had gathered on Station Helix 9 to finalize the labor contracts for the new mining operation on Turthos 4, and nobody expected complications. Least of all from the humans. I was there as a junior trade observer for the Velkari Consortium, which meant I stood in the corner with my data tablet and kept my mandibles shut. My supervisor, High Merchant Quarrel, sat at the obsidian table alongside representatives from the Drantine Empire, the Sereth Collective, and 9 other powers who'd carved up this sector of space like a particularly profitable carcass. The humans had sent exactly one person. Her name was Dr. Elena Vasquez, and she looked like she'd blow away in a stiff breeze. This is insulting. Quarrel's voice boomed through his translation collar. You send one fragile mammal to negotiate industrial contracts? Dr. Vasquez smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. She was small by human standards, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail, and wearing a simple gray suit that looked 2 sizes too practical for a diplomatic function. I was under the impression this was a contract signing, not a negotiation. The terms were settled 3 cycles ago. The Drantine representative, a 4-armed giant named Korax, let out a sound that translated roughly to contemptuous laughter. His species stood nearly 9 feet tall and could bend Duralloy support beams for fun. Then why are you here, little human? To watch us divide the profits while your kind scrapes ore with those weak little fingers? She set her briefcase on the table. The click echoed. I'm here because the medical surveys came back. You didn't include them in your final reports. Medical surveys? Coral waved a dismissive claw. Your people signed waivers. The work is dangerous. The work is deadly. Dr. Vasquez opened her briefcase and pulled out a data chip. Turthos 4 has 0.98 standard gravity, a thin atmosphere requiring constant respirator use, and surface temperatures that swing 60 degrees between day and night. Your projected casualty rate for human workers over a 2-year contract is 47%. Silence fell like a dropped anvil. Then Korax laughed again, louder this time. So, humans are expendable. You breed quickly. You have billions packed on that little water world. What's a few thousand dead laborers when the pay is good? I watched Dr. Vasquez's hands. They didn't shake. They didn't clench. They simply rested on either side of her briefcase, relaxed and steady. When she spoke, her voice could have been discussing the weather. The Galactic Labor Accord, Section 7, Subsection 4, Paragraph 22. No contract may knowingly subject workers to conditions resulting in greater than 5% casualty rates without additional hazard compensation, medical support, and voluntary consent verified by independent audit. Kurol's mandibles clicked in irritation. The waivers were signed under false pretenses. Your survey teams reported 0.85 gravity and stable temperatures. Either your surveyors are incompetent or you lied, given that your consortium has pulled this exact scam on 3 other colonies in the past decade. I'm leaning toward the latter. The mood in the room shifted. Coral's carapace plates flexed, a sign of agitation in Velkari physiology. The Sereth delegate, a serpentine creature named Thesic, coiled tighter in her suspension chair. Even Korax stopped laughing. You accuse us of fraud. I accuse you of murder with extra steps. Dr. Vasquez pressed a button on her data chip. Holographic displays bloomed above the table showing medical projections, atmospheric data, and about 40 pages of legal citations I'd need 3 years of law training to understand. These contracts are void. You will refile with accurate environmental data, you will increase hazard pay by a factor of 8, and you will provide full medical facilities staffed by human doctors. Or, she paused and that smile came back. The Terran Federation pulls all human labor from this sector and lodges formal complaints with the Galactic Commerce Authority. I understand that would delay your mining operation by approximately 18 months while you find replacement workers. I also understand your investors won't be thrilled about that. Korax rose from his seat. All 4 arms spread wide in an intimidation display that would make a smart person reconsider their life choices. You dare threaten this council? You're one fragile human surrounded by species that could snap you like a twig. Dr. Vasquez didn't blink. Sit down, Korax. Or what? He took a step toward her. His shadow swallowed her like nightfall. You'll cry? You'll break? You'll scatter into pieces if I so much as breathe on you. She stood up. 5.5 feet of human facing down 9 feet of muscled predator. I'll show you exactly what human fragility means. That's when things got interesting. And by interesting I mean absolutely terrifying. Dr. Vasquez reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small metal rod, maybe 8 inches long and half an inch thick. Standard Duralloy The kind used in ship hulls and load-bearing structures throughout the galaxy. The kind that required industrial hydraulic presses to ship. She held it up between her thumb and forefinger like she was showing off a particularly nice pen. This is grade 5 Duralloy. Tensile strength of approximately 90,000 pounds per square inch. Used in everything from station bulkheads to cargo container frames. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Thorall leaned forward. What is your point, human? My point. Dr. Vasquez gripped the rod with both hands, placing them about 2 inches apart. Is that humans didn't get to the top of our food chain by being strong? We got there by being stubborn. Her knuckles whitened. The rod didn't move. For 3 seconds nothing happened. Then I heard it. A low, creaking groan of metal under stress. The Duralloy rod began to bend. That's impossible, Thessic whispered. Her muscle density is 0.7 standard. She doesn't have the physical capability. The rod bent further. 30 degrees. 45. Dr. Vasquez's face remained calm, but I could see the veins standing out on her forearms, the slight tremor in her shoulders. 60 degrees. 9. She folded that Duralloy rod completely in half like she was closing a book, then set it gently on the table. The sound it made hitting the obsidian surface was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Every being in that room stared at the bent metal, then at Dr. Vasquez's hands, then back at the metal. Corex had gone very still. When you're a species that prides itself on raw strength, watching something physically weaker do the impossible tends to ruin your whole day. How? Carl's voice had lost its booming authority. Dr. Vasquez flexed her fingers, working out the stiffness. Humans have this interesting characteristic called adrenaline, stress hormone. When we're threatened or angry or protecting something we care about, our bodies flood with it. Temporarily overrides our natural limiters. We can lift cars off trapped children, punch through wooden doors. Apparently, she glanced at the bent rod, bent Duralloy. When sufficiently motivated, the medical damage, Thessic started, will heal. Humans are also stupidly good at healing. Broken bones, torn muscles, damaged organs. We knit back together and keep going. It's inefficient and painful and completely insane from an evolutionary standpoint. But it means we can survive things that would kill most species in this room. She sat back down, crossing her legs like she hadn't just violated 3 laws of physics. So let me be very clear. I'm not threatening you because I can break you physically. Most of you could tear me apart without trying. I'm threatening you because humans are the most stubborn, persistent, irritatingly resilient species you'll ever meet. We'll sue you into bankruptcy. We'll tie up your operations in legal appeals for decades. We'll make doing business in this sector so expensive and complicated that your great-grandchildren will curse your names. And we'll do it with smiles on our faces because spite is basically our 4th macronutrient. The silence that followed could have suffocated stars. Finally, Coral spoke. The contracts will be revised. Full medical facilities. Accurate environmental data. 8 times hazard compensation. 10 times. And the medical facilities will have human Volcari, Gantine and Sarath staff. Your workers deserve the same protection as ours. I watched my supervisor's mandibles work in what I'd learned to recognize as grudging respect. Agreed. Dr. Vasquez stood and closed her briefcase. The bent Duralloy rod remained on the table like a monument to uncomfortable truths. Pleasure doing business with you, gentlemen. And lady. She nodded to Thessic. I'll have the revised contracts on your desks by morning. Oh, and Corex, she turned to face the Drantine representative. Next time you want to intimidate someone, maybe check if they're carrying concealed insurance first. She walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss. For 30 seconds nobody moved. Then everyone started talking at once. Carol was already on his communicator, probably calling the legal department. Thessic had retreated into her coils. Carol's just stared at his 4 massive hands like they'd personally betrayed him. I looked down at my data tablet and made a note. Under the human file I typed recommend extreme caution in future negotiations. Physical weakness is not the same as actual weakness. Possibly the opposite. Then I paused and added, also they're absolutely insane, but the kind of insane that gets results. 3 hours later, I was in the station commissary trying to process what I'd witnessed when Dr. Vasquez sat down across from me. She had a cup of something steaming in a plate of what looked like compressed protein. Mind if I join you? I gestured to the seat she'd already taken. You caused quite a stir, Doctor. Elena is fine, she sipped her drink. And I didn't cause anything. I just corrected a potentially fatal misunderstanding by bending Duralloy with your bare hands. That was just theater. Could have shown them the legal precedents and medical data until they gave in. But sometimes people need a demonstration. Make it visceral. Make it memorable. Make it impossible to ignore. Humans learned a long time ago that being underestimated is its own kind of weapon. Is it true? About the adrenaline? Completely. We're chemical cocktail factories wrapped in anxiety and poor impulse control. Makes us dangerous when cornered. She leaned back. But here's the thing nobody tells you about humans. We're not dangerous because we're strong or fast or have natural weapons. We're dangerous because we remember. Every slight, every betrayal, every broken promise. We'll wait years for the right moment. We'll work within your systems, learn your rules, find every loophole and weak point, and then we'll make you regret underestimating us. Politely, legally, and with extensive documentation. I thought about the bent Duralloy rod. That sounds exhausting. Oh, it absolutely is. But spite is an incredible motivator. She finished her drink and stood. Enjoy your evening. And if you ever transfer to contract law, look me up. The Terran Federation always needs good observers who understand that strength comes in many forms. She left me sitting there, staring at my protein cube and reconsidering everything I thought I knew about power dynamics. The next morning, the revised contracts arrived. Every species got the same protections, the same medical support, the same hazard pay. The mortality projections dropped from 47% to less than 3% across the board. The project would cost 30% more and take 4 months longer to complete. Every consortium member signed without complaint, and somewhere in a locked drawer in Coral's office, a bent Duralloy rod served as a permanent reminder. Never mock what you don't understand, especially if it looks fragile. 6 months later, I got transferred to Terrathas. Fora, apparently watching Dr. Vasquez bend reality and metal, had qualified me as someone who understood humans, which was hilarious because I understood them about as well as I understood quantum mechanics after one introductory lecture. But the Valkyrie consortium needed liaisons on the ground, and my name was on a very short list of people who'd witnessed the Duralloy incident without requiring psychological counseling afterward. The mining colony was a testament to what happens when you actually follow safety regulations, proper atmospheric processors, medical facilities that didn't look like glorified first aid stations, and living quarters that wouldn't give you claustrophobia just from looking at the floor plans. The human contingent numbered about 4,000 workers, mixed in with roughly 8,000 personnel from a dozen other species. By all accounts, the operation was running smoothly, which should have been my first warning that something interesting was about to happen. I was doing a routine inspection of the eastern tunnels when the alarm started screaming. Not the polite beeping that meant someone had left a pressure door unsealed. The full gut-churning wail that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. My communicator crackled to collapse in Tunnel 7. Multiple workers trapped. Medical teams respond immediately. I ran. Well, ran is generous. I scrambled through corridors while trying not to trip over my own legs, following the flow of emergency personnel toward the disaster site. When I arrived, controlled chaos had taken over. The entrance to Tunnel 7 was blocked by about 40 tons of collapsed rock and support beams. Dust hung in the air like fog. Engineers were already setting up cutting equipment while medical teams prepared triage stations. And standing in the middle of it all, somehow looking both completely calm and absolutely furious, was Elena Vasquez. She'd traded her diplomatic suit for mining gear, though she still somehow managed to look like she was about to ruin someone's quarterly earnings report. Status: a Drantine engineer, not Korax but someone equally massive named Valkyries, gestured at the rubble. Seismic sensor failed to detect a fault line. 8 workers trapped on the other side, 3 humans, 2 Valkyrie, 2 Seraph, 1 Drantine. The collapse destabilized the entire tunnel structure. If we cut through with standard equipment, we risk a secondary collapse that could kill everyone, trapped workers included. Time to clear it safely? 18 hours minimum. They have maybe 6 hours of air less if they're panicking. Elena pulled out her communicator. This is Dr. Vasquez. I need every human worker not currently operating critical systems to report to Tunnel 7 immediately. Also, someone get me a structural engineer and about 500 pounds of emergency support brackets. Bakris's confusion translated clearly despite the species barrier. What are you planning? Something stupid, dangerous, and probably against multiple safety protocols. She turned to face the crowd of workers that was already forming. Humans started arriving in groups, abandoning their posts, their meals, their sleep shifts. Within 10 minutes, maybe 200 humans stood in that tunnel, waiting. Elena climbed onto a supply crate so everyone could see her. Listen up. 8 people are dying behind that wall. We don't have time to do this the safe way, so we're going to do it the human way, which means it's going to hurt. Some of us are going to end up in medical, and we're all going to have stories that'll sound completely unbelievable afterward. Who's in? Every single hand went up. Not one hesitation. Not one voice of dissent. I watched aliens from a dozen species step back in confusion and no small amount of concern. This was not normal behavior. This was not rational survival instinct. This was something else entirely. Elena pointed at the rubble. We're going to move that pile by hand. Piece by piece. Rock by rock. The engineers will place support brackets as we clear space. We form a line past debris backward, and we do not stop until those people are out. Understood. A human near the front. A broad-shouldered woman with scars on her arms and a name tag that read Kowalski, raised her voice. Doc, that's Duralloy reinforcement beams in there. Same stuff you bent in half at the negotiation. Most of us can't do that party trick. You won't be bending them. You'll be lifting them. Together. Elena hopped down from the crate. Humans didn't evolve to be the strongest or fastest. We evolved to work in groups. To coordinate to accomplish things that should be impossible for individual organisms. Every person here is about to prove why our species went from throwing rocks at predators to building stations that orbit black holes. Now move. What happened next was something I'm still not entirely sure I can describe accurately. Humans swarmed that collapse site like a particularly determined swarm of insects. Except insects don't usually curse that creatively or coordinate that effectively. They formed chains, passing rocks hand to hand with a rhythm that somehow emerged from chaos. When they hit a support beam too heavy for one person, 4 or 5 would grab it together and haul it free through sheer synchronized stubbornness. I watched a man who couldn't have weighed more than 160 pounds lift a boulder that should have required mechanical assistance. His face turned purple, veins stood out on his neck, and I was certain he was about to drop dead from an aneurysm. Instead, he passed the rock to the person behind him and reached for the next one. A woman near the front started bleeding from her palms where the rough stone had torn skin. She wrapped her hands in strips of cloth from her shirt and kept working. Elena was everywhere at once, directing traffic, making sure the engineers had space to install supports, pulling workers back when sections looked unstable. She'd grab a rock herself when a gap appeared in the line, then move on to coordinate the next section. I noticed her hands were bleeding too. She didn't seem to care. This is insanity, Vokers shouted over the controlled chaos. They're going to kill themselves, probably. Elena didn't look away from the collapse. But they're also going to save 8 lives, so it balances out. 2 hours in, they'd cleared maybe 10 feet. Medical teams were already treating cases of exhaustion, torn muscles, and in one memorable case a dislocated shoulder that the worker in question popped back into socket himself before returning to the line. The non-human workers had started helping, shamed into action by watching humans literally break themselves to save people they'd never met. Vakari used their natural climbing abilities to reach high sections. Sereth wrapped around support beams to stabilize them while engineers worked. Even the Drantine contingent joined in, their massive strength finally being used for something other than intimidation. 4 hours in, they broke through. A small gap appeared in the rubble, maybe 2 feet across. Air whistled through from the other side. Someone shone a light into the darkness. We see them. They're alive. The pace somehow increased. Humans who looked like they should have collapsed from exhaustion found reserves of energy that shouldn't have existed. More rocks, more beams, more impossible feats of endurance. The gap widened. 3 feet. 4. 5. Large enough for a person to squeeze through if they didn't mind additional bruising. Elena was the first one in. Of course she was. She disappeared into that gap without hesitation, and I heard her voice echoing from the other side. Medical team's ready. We've got injuries. I need stretchers and oxygen. Now, they pulled out the trapped workers one by one. 2 Valkyrie with broken limbs, wrapped carefully to avoid further damage. A Sereth with severe respiratory distress from the dust. 3 humans in various states of consciousness. The Drantine came out last, being the largest, and had to be partially dug free from where fallen debris had pinned his legs. Throughout it all, humans worked with mechanical precision, passing out the injured, providing first aid, coordinating with medical teams. When the last worker was clear, Elena emerged from the gap. She was covered in dust, bleeding from a dozen cuts, and limping badly on her left leg. She looked at the assembled crowd of workers, human and otherwise, and nodded once. Good work. Someone make sure tunnel 8 through 12 are evacuated and inspected. I want every seismic sensor on this facility tested and recalibrated. And get these people to medical before they collapse. As if her words were permission, humans started dropping where they stood. Not dramatically, just sitting down hard and trying to remember how breathing worked. Medical teams scrambled to keep up. I watched Kowalski get treated for 2 broken fingers she hadn't even noticed. Another worker had cracked 3 ribs and kept working anyway. The collective injuries would have devastated a normal work crew. These humans would probably be back on shift in a week, maybe 2. I found Elena sitting against a wall near the medical station, letting a Seraph nurse wrap her hands in synthetic skin. That was the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. She laughed, then winced, probably cracked a rib. Yeah, humans are good at terrifying. We're even better at not giving up. You could have killed yourselves. Multiple times. Could have. Didn't. She flexed her bandaged hands. You know what the real difference is between humans and most species? It's not strength or speed or intelligence. It's that we decided a long time ago that dying for each other was an acceptable trade. Not preferred, obviously, but accept. Those 8 people trapped in there? 3 of them were human. 5 weren't. Didn't matter. They were crew. They were colleagues. So we broke ourselves a little bit to make sure they didn't break permanently. Vokris approached, carrying his helmet in 2 of his 4 hands. The massive Drantine looked uncomfortable, which was unusual for a species that considered discomfort a sign of weakness. Dr. Vasquez, I owe you an apology. For what? For believing you were fragile. For thinking humans were weak. For every assumption I made based on your physical limitations. He gestured at the tunnel behind us, where engineers were still installing permanent supports. What your people did today was impossible. And yet I watched it happen. Elena stood up with visible effort. We're not strong, Vokris. We're stubborn. There's a difference. Strong is lifting the weight. Stubborn is refusing to put it down until the job is done, even when your muscles are screaming and your body is breaking. Humans mastered stubborn about 1 million years ago. Everything else is just details. The Drantine nodded slowly. Then I am very glad we revised those contracts 6 months ago. I would not want to face human stubbornness as an enemy. Smart. Elena patted his arm with her bandaged hand. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to file about 40 incident reports and then sleep for approximately 16 hours. Try not to collapse any more tunnels while I'm unconscious. Over the following weeks I watched something shift in the colony dynamics. The humans were no longer the fragile newcomers that everyone had to be careful around. They were the crazy ones who'd moved 40 tons of rock with their bare hands to save 8 lives. Other species started asking them for help with impossible tasks. Heavy equipment stuck in mud. Get some humans, they'll figure it out. Supply shipment delayed and you need to manually unload 3 shipping containers. Humans will organize a chain and have it done in an hour while singing something they called working songs that made absolutely no sense but somehow improved efficiency by 30%. The bent Duralloy rod from the negotiation became something of a legend. Workers would reference it when facing difficult tasks. Remember the rod, they'd say, and then proceed to do something that should have been impossible. It became shorthand for human determination, human stubbornness, human refusal to accept defeat. 3 months after the tunnel collapse, the mining operation hit its quarterly targets ahead of schedule and under budget. The casualty rate remained at less than 2%, and most of those were minor injuries that healed within days. Every species worked together with a level of coordination that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. And at the center of it all, usually found in the administrative offices filing reports or in the tunnels doing surprise inspections, was Dr. Elena Vasquez. I found her one evening in the observation lounge watching Tirthadas 4's twin moons rise over the mining fields. She had a glass of something amber that I'd learned was called whiskey, though why humans voluntarily poisoned themselves with ethanol remained one of the universe's great mysteries. I've been thinking about what you said, I told her, sitting down carefully on the human-sized furniture. About humans being dangerous because you remember, and, I think you left something out. You're dangerous because you make everyone around you better. Stronger, braver. We all watched you move that mountain by hand and we learned something about what's possible when you refuse to give up. I paused. The Valkyrie have a saying. The strongest tree stands alone. But that's not true, is it? The strongest trees are forests. Elena smiled and raised her glass. Took us a while to figure that out too. Used to be we fought each other more than we cooperated. Tribalism, nationalism, all the usual ways sentient species hurt themselves. Then we got to space and realized how small we were. How fragile, how easily the universe could crush us if we didn't watch each other's backs. So we made a choice. We decided that every human life mattered, and eventually that every sapient life mattered, even the ones that mocked our fragility. You're not fragile, though. That's what everyone gets wrong. Oh, we absolutely are. Bones break, skin tears, organs fail. We're biological disasters held together by optimism and spite. But fragile doesn't mean weak. It means we have to be careful, strategic, creative. It means we learn to build tools in communities and civilizations because we couldn't survive any other way. She finished her drink. Fragility made us dangerous. Because we had to be. I looked out at the moons, thinking about bent Duralloy and moved mountains and 8 lives saved by 200 pairs of bleeding hands. I'm glad the Terran Federation joined the Galactic community. Most days, so are we? Though I'm pretty sure we're giving the Galactic Commerce Authority constant headaches. Probably. But the good kind of headaches. The kind that means things are changing for the better. Elena laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. 6 months later, I received a promotion and transfer back to the home office. My supervisor, Coral, still kept that bent Duralloy rod in his desk. Sometimes during difficult negotiations, he'd take it out and set it on the table. He never explained it to anyone who wasn't there that day. He didn't need to. The message was clear. Underestimate humans at your own peril. Me? I learned a different lesson. I learned that strength comes in forms you don't expect, from places you didn't look, and through people you mistakenly believed were weak. I learned that humans were simultaneously the most fragile and most durable species in known space. And I learned that when a human tells you something is impossible, they're usually about to prove themselves wrong. Dr. Elena Vasquez sent me a message on my last day at Turthus 4. It was short, just 3 sentences. Thanks for being a good observer. Remember what you learned here. And if you ever need a mountain moved, you know who to call. I still have that message. I probably always will. Because some lessons are worth keeping. And some teachers change how you see the entire universe. Humans taught the galaxy that fragility and strength aren't opposites. They're partners, and together, they can bend Duralloy, move mountains, and reshape the very definition of what's possible. All you need is stubbornness, spite, and the absolute refusal to give up on the people standing beside you. Turns out, humans have an unlimited supply of all 3.